So welcome to the Secure Dynamics TechCast. With me, I have one former guest, Naomi Buckwalter, who is a virtual CISO. Welcome back to the show, Naomi.
Hey, Ashwin, great to be here again. Thanks.
And I have Anthony Johnson, who I connected with about 4 months ago, and I've been following your posts, Anthony. So it looks like I've known you forever, but you're the first time guest on this show. Anthony is a CSO at Netscope, managing partner, board member, Forbes Business Council, tech advisor, and CISO. I think I've covered everything, Anthony.
I think so, just about.
Okay. All right. So let's get started on something that I think has been talked about, but not as much as we should, because we've been talking about how a CISO's role has evolved from, let's say, 10 years ago to where he or she is today. So Naomi, let's start with you. From your perspective, where do you think a CISO is today, and what are the barometers for success that may be different than it was in the past?
Yeah, so I'll say I think the CISO is absolutely more of a part of the business. We're given more attention. We have more budget. Overall, we're given a seat at the table. And any executive, if you ask them that are outside of security, hey, is security important? Every single one of them will say, yes, of course, of course, of course. The issue that I do see is like maybe we don't have the level of political capital that we need to make real change in the business. And that's kind of holding us back, right? We can't influence across different parts of the organization. We can't just pull a rope and have things happen. We still need to win hearts and minds. We still need to convince people and build trust. And that takes time. So the evolution, we're moving towards the right direction, but the evolution is slow.
Anthony, your thoughts?
So I have a little bit of a different opinion. Perhaps, and it's partly because security leaders have they try to play both sides of the coin a lot of times. So what I mean by that is when I was a CISO at JP Morgan, for example, I was responsible for all cyber for the corporate investment bank, and I had to own any breach incident and everything. And there are a lot of CISOs today who say, hey, I don't own the risk. It's this crazy analogy of saying, could you imagine a CFO who said, yeah, I don't really own the budget. And you either own it or you don't. Like you can't have a chief risk officer or a COO say that they are not responsible for the operational execution of the organization. And CISOs too often try to play this delicate balance of saying, no, we just advise. And if you're not an advisor, if you're an advisor, then you're not truly an accountable executive. And everyone, we need to have CISOs that are accountable executives. I think that's becoming more and more the norm, or the expectation rather.
So sticking with you, Anthony, for a minute, right? When we talk about accountability, and this is something that has obviously surfaced to the top thanks to SolarWinds. In terms of a role, doesn't necessarily just protect the enterprise, but also goes, if it's a product or a services company, now it encompasses everything from supply chain to third party. So how have CISOs embraced this? I mean, far expanded view that they need to have. And again, going back to your question about accountability.
I think many times, I mean, they will say, like, here's a really great example. And I probably talk to Fortune 1000 CISOs every week, probably 5 to 10 every single week. I don't know a single CISO yet who's been given new money to deal with the supply chain risk. Everyone has been asked to be smarter about their money, right? And say, oh, well, you should already have been thinking through that. But I have not yet met somebody who's like, man, as soon as SolarWinds happened, I got this windfall of money. Like that's not, and so we can say we can say, oh man, it's super important. But we know that in business, when things are really important, funding comes with it. So there's nobody who's going to say it's not important. Like that's the party line. Cybersecurity is important. Absolutely. I got to pay. I have to say those words. Are you willing to put new money to it? Well, I mean, listen, I think that you got a lot of money. You guys should rethink through that. So like we kind of talk out of both sides of our mouth, not just as security leaders, but as businesses overall as well.
So Naomi, again, extending that, so that's a tough place to be in, right? I mean, the business requires you to be accountable, and here you are trying to spin various things with limited budget or not expanding budget. And is it a daily basis you come in and say, hey, these are the things that we're going to look at and these others are going to fall off? And I mean, how does the team even stay motivated with this constantly changing landscape?
Yeah, so my viewpoint is from the side of the small and mid-sized business. So I do not work with many Fortune 1000 companies like Anthony does. That's quite a privilege. But I come from a background where it's a very highly regulated compliance framework type of financial industry giants that I did work with. But 99.7% of all US businesses are small and mid-sized or fewer than 500 employees. So I can tell you for a fact, security is important to all of them. They might not have a full-time professional to do security, but at our level in the small mid-sized space, security is everyone's responsibility. So you have more accountability at all levels, which is great. And you do have sort of that security person trying to do a lot of the strategy and tactical work, and you get really hands-on. It's a lot of fun. The thing is, like, if we want to improve our posture at any security company, and we do ask for money, but sometimes that money is just not there. So we have to work with the rest of our team to get them to do security activities. And it's a very interesting problem. You have to make security part of their tasks. So you shift everything left. You say, hey, engineering team, I need help securing this infrastructure. Or hey, application team, I need help securing your applications. So it's not centralized to one team. It's actually scaled throughout the organization. It's a lot cheaper that way. And I don't have to ask for a huge budget because it's already built into other teams' budgets.
So again, sticking with go ahead, Anthony.
I was going to say one thing that I wanted just to toss in there, which is a really, really great point, Naomi, that you made, is that a lot of this, like these new emerging cyber products, they're actually engineered and built for these mega organizations, like very big budgets. And then they have to be, small to medium businesses have to figure out like what's a more realistic consumer grade version of CrowdStrike, for example, right? Because everybody, the conversation is just dominated by these uber very niche products built for, really 500 companies or 1,000 companies, when, to your point, most of US GDP is not that, right? And so I think that we as an industry have kind of gone backwards. We said we're gonna build we're gonna build Louis Vuitton products and then figure out like, hey, everyone needs bags, so let's come up with bags. When the rest of the world market were like, hey, well, there's these bags, let's make them high end. And so we're trying to back into this thing from what we normally do.
Yeah, and I cannot afford your Louis Vuitton bags. That's a great analogy. I can't wait to use that one. 43% of all breaches occur for small and mid-sized businesses. So it's not like a small thing. Criminals are interested in small and mid-sized businesses. So the fact that we're not putting the right products in our organization, we don't have the money. I'm telling you, Anthony, I don't know how much you spend, but when I look at my security budget, I'm just grateful for what I can get. And I'm telling you, it's pennies compared to yours. And I'm sure it is. But security vendors are pricing us out of the market. We cannot afford their stuff. Something like a 60 grand penetration test is already outside my budget. So it's things like that where I'm looking for the dollars. I'm looking for the cost savings. I'm looking for that ROI. And the security vendors really do not understand the small and mid-sized market.
Wow, yeah. So that is shining a light that on something that hasn't been talked about, right? Which is really, I mean, you're talking about budget right now. So what can so how do you break this divide? Because I'm kind of I've seen it both sides, right? I mean, being on the vendor side and now doing these kinds of conversations, is clearly there is a lack of awareness. So how do you bring about that? I know, Naomi, you're blazing the trail when it comes to getting new people into cyber and bringing down the barriers of entry that are there. But from a vendor perspective, how do they gain awareness into markets that need to be served, and yet they, like you're saying, the pricing is out of proportion?
Yeah, I work with a lot of startups. I don't really go for the big Qualys and Rapid7. I already know they're going to be too pricey. But whenever they do reach out to me, I'm happy to have a conversation about their products and just tell them. I just tell them, hey, you are way overpriced for us. What can you work with me here? My company's 250 people. My budget is X amount of dollars. Can you help me out here? Usually they're pretty good. They're like, yeah, we have a small mid-sized team. We can work with you there. And I'm able to pull down their numbers a little bit. And that's always fun. Where can I save money? Some security vendors actually have a free community version. I know Contrast Security is a really big player in the interactive security, application security testing space. They're wonderful. They have a community edition of their product. I think more security vendors could do this, where they have a free version where we can do a test of it within our environment in a safe space, and we can see if it works. And if we find some value in it, then let us pay for it. I'm happy to pay for it as long as it's not costing us $6,000 or six figures, right? That's way too much money for a small and mid-sized business.
Yeah, and I think that what you'll see, and this is one of the reasons why I love organizations like Netskope, are that the move really is to become more and more of a platform type of solution, right? The best example is Google, in my opinion, right? Anybody who's starting a company and doesn't consider G Suite or move on G Suite as like the foundation for your domain, hosting, email, documents, collaborate, everything, like you're totally missing a massive opportunity. Not only is it very inexpensive, but they've built in a lot of security. When I own Delve Risk, and one of the things when we do vendor assessments, or we go through vendor assessments, like, hey, how are you managing your phishing and malware? It's like, we use G Suite. it's built in, right? Like, I don't actually have to have a whole different type of solution for that. And so as more and more security vendors align to a standard platform offering, I think and I hope that they move more down market to the SMB, to something that is more of a turnkey that an SMB can just buy and say, you know what, I'm going to get my entire CASB point of everything managed in one ecosystem, and I don't have to go ahead and try to negotiate with this big, large vendor, because I can buy it as a turnkey solution. And that's where we get amazing scalability.
Oh, I love Google. I mean, for that reason, you're right. It scales everywhere. And our small and mid-sized business uses G Suite. It's great. Everything's integrated. Your SSO is integrated. Everything's there. Yep. APIs are amazing. We're using their cloud, right? So, not yep. for our production environment. So just so you know. But yeah, it's great. There's companies that can do this. You can make money off of this small and mid-sized folks. And remember, we're small and mid-sized today, but we're hoping to go IPO in a couple of years. So watch out for the small and mid-sized. We're here to take over the world. Like, we're not here just to stay small. Like, we want to get bigger.
So shifting a focus a little bit, going into the CISO's, his or her organization, I think there's a dichotomy over here. Clearly, from a SMB perspective, there's probably not a team. There's probably an IT person, and he or she is also managing security. And then from a larger organization perspective, what sorts of skill sets does a CISO now need to look for when either promoting within their own team and or recruit from outside? And has that mind shift happened, or are they still going by the same playbook that was in play, let's say 10, 15 years ago? So Anthony, let's start with you.
I think it's the expectations of both the security leader and their team has shifted and will continue to shift. Part of the problem is the fact, and I love that, Sunil Yu, he has this great analogy where he talks about we have way too many pets and not enough cattle, right? Like, effectively, our server systems, ecosystem, we name them, we care for them, we can't just blow them away. And so organizations have too many pets, which means legacy systems, applications, things that you have to hire somebody with a specific skill set. So we're still hiring skills that, we may not want anymore, but it's that one system still requires it. But I think that we are moving more towards an ecosystem of cattle, where things are more interchangeable. It's the security controls and risk controls are baked further left. They're baked into the ecosystem a lot more. And I think that that's where we will get more scalability. I actually don't think, and this is where I run counter with a lot of people, I don't actually think the human capital problem in cyber is a forever problem. I think it'll be solved in the next 5-10 years. And I think it's going to be solved not just by AI, but by standardization. And when we standardize more on various platforms and we have more cattle instead of pets, we're not going to have 2 million open jobs. It's going to be a much smaller number, and they'll be baked more into IT. And I think that the CISO becomes more of a business leader, which blows me away, the number of CISOs who don't actually listen to their earnings statements, or they've never read their 10K, or they don't read their Q. They're like, no, I don't do that. I'm like, all right, you'll be there for like 6 months. So just my view.
So Naomi, again, I know you have thoughts on this.
The average tenure is 18 months, so it's not that far off. Well, from the small and mid-sized business, I agree. The CISO needs to be a business leader and understand the business. I understand our earnings report. I have a master's degree in business. I'm okay. But there's a lot of other CISOs who are more technical. What we're seeing a trend is, though, however, is they move from a more technical hire into someone who has both technical and people skills. So there's an awesome book out there. I didn't write this, but I just started reading it over the weekend. It's called The Smartest Person in the Room. It's by a wonderful person named Christian Espinosa. And I'm sorry to just put that up there, but it's a wonderful read. I'm about halfway through. And he just says, the thing that's really holding us back from winning the war against cybersecurity is the fact that a lot of our technical folks, extremely technical, really great. The problem is they have a real communication issue. There are issues with empathy and understanding the business, a really low level of people skills. And that is holding them back from making real change and influencing and persuading the business into doing the right things. So we're seeing a lot of people say, oh, I do tell them what to do, but they just won't do it, right? They're the idiots. I actually had someone IM me the other day and say, it's not my fault. The cybersecurity people are just fine. It's the business that are the idiots. We're fine. It's the business. So it's that mindset that's holding us back. The fact that we're not partners in all of this, we're not on the same team. It's us versus them. And it always has been. That's the status quo. What I want and what I'm seeing and what I advocate for on a daily basis is for getting new people in with fresh ideas, more of that emotional intelligence, which you can see through all the different culture conversations that we have. And the new generation, the next generation up, has a little bit more of that emotional intelligence built into their culture in their daily life. They just understand it a little bit more. So we want to bring those folks in and change the conversation, change the way and the Overton window into having more of those emotional intelligence mindset, and that will help influence and make our jobs a little bit easier, and we'll be better at it too.
Yeah, I think it's also funny because when we look at the numbers across the Fortune 1000, so my company, we actually study the Fortune 1000 like pretty deeply, right? And it's really interesting. So the average tenure of the Fortune 1000 CISOs 4.7 years. Which is dramatically different from what the industry kind of thinks about as the 18 months or 2 year kind of window. But there's 57% of CISOs in the Fortune 1000 do not actually have a technical background, right? Mm-hmm. They're more from a governance risk audit perspective. And there's a very, very small subset that were actually developers. So, you start to get into who's actually sat in the chair of the people that are really shaping the future. And when you get into these very large organizations, it's a very myopic set. So I think the expectation is changing to become much more business focused. But it's fascinating just kind of hear Naomi's perspective of the ecosystem she's seeing, relative to larger enterprises, because it's a shift on both sides.
So it actually reminds me of and this is an analogy which is not cyber related, but when you're talking about empathy, it kind of hit me. The late CEO of Zappos, Tony Hsieh, when Zappos, this was pre the Amazon acquisition. So apparently they used to get these new hire on-campus interviewees who used to fly in, and they'd actually have the hiring manager go and pick him or her up. And in that 30-45 minute drive from the airport to that hotel, if the candidate would not talk or discuss or engage with the driver, quote unquote, the manager, he or she was already screened out. So again, it brought into focus like, hey, what does Zappos stand for? And if you are not one of the people who can actually engage with the customers, we really don't need you. And so most of the times the decision was made by the time he or she got to the hotel. So final question, again, Naomi, starting with you. I know you're doing a lot to kind of bring in folks without a college degree, without certifications, without 3 to 5 years, like looking at something today, entry-level candidate with 3 to 5 years experience. That was the description, right? And I don't know who's creating these, right? But the question is, how does that kind of, I know you personally are doing a lot, but again, looking at what is needed in cybersecurity today, and again, Anthony, to your point about the left shift that's happening and we need more cattle than pets, are we actually looking for cattle? Are we actually getting people in who are actually able to change colors because the industry is going to shift so fast? So Naomi.
Oh, well, I would say the cattle is out there. There's plenty of people who are interested in breaking in. The hard part is like, we don't really have spots for them. Like there are plenty of cattle. We just don't have the stalls for them, right? So the idea is to train and mentor the folks and teach them what good information security practice looks like. My cohort, my generation absolutely knows what that looks like. Maybe we don't have the soft skills and the people skills in order to really bring about effective change. But if we teach and mentor the next generation, in 5 years, they will will be those experts and those grizzly veterans that we do need for the future breaches. Because what I don't want to see is in 20 years, the same types of incidents happening and the same kind of breaches and the same privacy issues. Like, I don't want that. I want us to evolve. I want this industry to actually win the fight against cybercrime. And the amount of, you can just see the open positions are more for the mid and senior level positions, right? You won't see them filled because we just don't have the supply. Like, the supply is all at the entry level, but they will never get there without our help. So what I'm always advocating for is just take someone with the attitude and the aptitude and just the ability to learn critical thinking, emotional intelligence. These are things that cannot be taught. Like, you take a really smart person, like my current intern, opera singer, no technical background, majored in singing, right? So she is blowing it out of the water because she's technical. She's comfortable around computers. She can put 2 and 2 things together. She's actually very, very smart. And cybersecurity is not that difficult to learn. We need to stop with this myth that cybersecurity is actually difficult. Maybe it was difficult 20 years ago, but now we have protocols, frameworks, controls. We have courses online. We have books. We have people who have done this already, and they're willing to teach us. We just have to take the ability to take to somebody who has the ability to learn and teach them and train them.
Well, Anthony, take us home.
Yeah. So, I mean, listen, I think that there's a lot that we need to do to grow the next generation of talent, right? I think it goes well beyond the aspect of tech depth. Like, I love the approach that Naomi's talking about, emphasizing EQ. I think, I tend to do the same thing. I hire for hunger and aptitude, like more, or hunger and attitude more than just like tech aptitude, right? Some of the smartest people that I've ever worked with never went to college. They self-learned. They would just engross themselves in study. But there's something to be said, though, also when you have candidates, and this is true, who are straight out of college, expecting to walk into a $140,000 a year base salary role and get promoted 2 years later and be a manager. And it's like, I understand you want to move fast in your career, but that's not how this is going to work. You actually have to understand how to manage people, how to deal with situations. Like, there's a growth perspective here as well. So I think that probably the biggest change, though, is going through this notion of people going back into the office or not. Great talent is not going to go back. Great talent, and this is for every hiring manager out there. If you have somebody who's amazing, they're not going to opt for an hour or 45-minute each way commute anymore, right? They've already proven that we don't necessarily need to do that. And there are organizations who are already pushing on that. So we have to get more creative in how we kind of meet the needs and expectations of talent. And that goes kind of across the board here. So there's definitely a lot to do. It's going to be exciting to see how things kind of shape up, though.
Wow. Again, thanks for your time. Great conversation. Naomi, great conversation, Anthony. Looking forward to future dialogues.
Thanks, Ashley.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This was great.